Am I spotlighted? Am I ready to go? All right. It's 10:30. We're going to roll into this workshop session. This session will run from 10:30 until about 11:40. And this session is, it's called the Trail Maintenance Session. It's really about the challenges, opportunities, and ideas for resources for trail maintenance. We know that there's a good bit of support for trail acquisition and trail building, but there's a real challenge when we have to maintain trails over many decades. Maintenance is expensive, it requires a lot of labor, and there's relatively limited resources available for that work. I want to stress that we're not talking about the nuts and bolts of trail maintenance. We're not talking about ditching and surfacing and drainage and all of that. We are talking about strategies. We're talking about how we can raise the money, build the volunteer base to maintain our trails effectively. And to help us do that, we have three panelists who are going to present on this very subject. They are Brad Schmaltzer, Matt Yeager, and Ella Belling. We're going to start with Brad, but before we get into Brad's presentation, I want to mention that this session is sponsored by the Mills Group, which is an architectural and a planning and preservation organization. Many of us have worked with the Mills Group, and we do appreciate their sponsorship of this session and their support for this conference. Brad Schmaltzer is a founding member and president of the West Virginia Interscholastic Cycling League, which is a student development nonprofit developed in conjunction with the National Interscholastic Cycling Association. When he's not out there getting more kids on bikes, Bradley heads the Kanawha Valley Trail Alliance, KV Trails, which is a 501c3 focused on expanding outdoor opportunities in Southern West Virginia by assisting landowners and stakeholders through volunteer efforts, large and small. KV Trails assists with maintaining existing trails, constructing new trails, and providing the necessary tools and guidance to develop trail concepts into reality. Bradley is a board member of the Kanawha State Forest Foundation and a member of this trail committee, which works to maintain and improve the state forest versatile trail system. When not in the woods, Bradley acts as the director of legal services and administrative counsel to the Supreme Court of Appeals of West Virginia. Bradley currently resides in Charleston with his two girls and his very patient wife, Kristen. So Bradley, thank you for joining us. And I'm going to turn the show over to you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Kent. Really honored to have been invited to this. I'd like to thank West Virginia Trail and Kent and his folks for making such a wonderful mistake in inviting me to this panel. I'm kidding, of course. I did take a look at the attendance list, and it was really cool to see so many friends that I've made over the years in the trail community attending this. So hi out there. That background you laid out on me is pretty accurate. I wear a lot of hats, and it can be hard to kind of keep them straight, but fortunately they all kind of fit together on top of my head like Russian nesting dolls. They sort of all connect in some way. I am the president of the Kanawha Valley Trail Alliance, or KV Trails. We're a 501c3 local trail group formed officially in around 2019. And while our organization is new on paper, it's not really new in practice. Before I moved to West Virginia in 2009, I was living in Pittsburgh, and I had attended a few trail work days hosted by a group there called PTAG, which I believe is now Trail Pittsburgh. And after I moved to West Virginia, that kind of started my interest in becoming more than just a user, and sort of changing my mindset into that of more of a steward. And when I moved to West Virginia in 2009, I fell in with a group of mountain bikers and trail gnome types at Kanawha State Forest. This group had, before I got there, and since then, worked very closely with Kanawha State Forest's administration over the years to provide some pretty continuous assistance with trail maintenance issues and construction. And so fast forward over the years, it started to become clear to some of us that we probably need to start formalizing something we had been doing informally. And it was an opportunity for us to kind of marshal like-minded folks and resources. So the concept was that we would form this sort of membership-based volunteer organization that was focused on improving, quality, quantity, and access to trails for people in our community. For Kanawha Valley Trail Alliance, I see the word alliance appear often in nonprofit names, particularly in kind of this trail realm. But the alliance concept is actually very integral to what we were doing and what we wanted to do. What I was envisioning was sort of a team of like-minded folks that was a representative cross-section of trail users and parks in our community. So not just our little mountain bike group, rather, I wanted to kind of reach out to, that trail steward over there at Little Creek and the trail steward over there at Cato. And everybody had their own little fiefdoms. I wanted to bring them together. And I think we were pretty successful in doing that. And it is now represented and reflected well in our board, as well as our volunteer base. So, early on, the goal was to draw in people who might be of a similar mindset. And then once we got them, develop and solidify our relationships with those local land managers in the various parks around the Charleston area. And that includes, city parks, county parks. There are some private or privately owned land out there with trails on them. The Land Trust, Wallace Hartman Preserve, things of that nature. So, the idea then again was to sort of bring these groups together, bring these volunteer groups together, and as a unit, we could really do more as a large organization rather than everybody kind of out on their own in the woods. So it took a while. We had a lot of meetings, lots and lots of meetings, and not everyone survived the meeting phase of our organization, but those people that did were truly invested. And I kind of tell you all of this because I think explaining how we got to where we are explains how and why we operate the way we do. So this is a maintenance workshop. I'll stop editorializing on how we were formed. But from a maintenance perspective, because we've had a good track record with developing these relationships with land managers and the stewards and the users on the ground in the various parks, we always have a full plate. But how we got there is important, and how we stay there is even more important. And the answer to that question is volunteers, right? So that alliance thing. We're trying to bring these people together in these small trail user groups and bring them together to do a bigger and better thing. So how we do that is through volunteer work days. And this is a lot of this is going to be probably retreading things people who are in this sort of trail community already know, but hopefully there's some useful nuggets in here. So how we do this and what we do is we have a trail boss, usually a representative of a park who's on our board, and they will assist us with identifying maintenance needs throughout the parks. And what we do is we do a first Saturday of the month organized trail work day year round. Occasionally they have to get rescheduled, but that's kind of our big work day. We do it once a month. We highlight a park, we spotlight that park, we get the word out through social media, through our email list, and we work with the land manager to identify their concerns and their needs. And we show up, we do the work on a Saturday, and we leave the place in much better condition than it was when we found it. So in my experience, making all this come together is the product of a couple things. You have to successfully manage your volunteer trail work by developing relationships and managing risk. So you have to gather up a few things to do that. You need to get those super volunteers out there, those people that show up rain or shine, right? And oftentimes they have like too much energy. So you have to find other outlets for that energy. So in other words, aside from maybe asking them to just swing sticks at dirt, maybe get them on your board, get them on a committee, get them on a project, find those people. Those are the people you need. Second thing you need to do, get trained. Trail maintenance and construction, those are super helpful things to know, but getting your trail bosses first aid trained, CPR trained, critical. Get your guys who operate chainsaws after the Division of Forestry's chainsaw trainings. Develop safety protocols for your volunteers and follow them. Save yourself a lot of grief. The thing you need to do is just really get real. Set super clear, realistic expectations, both for land managers and volunteers. It's kind of a just because you can doesn't mean you should type of scenario sometimes when you're dealing with volunteers. So knowing what limitations should be in place is really critical. A good example of that might be using a buddy system. If you have new volunteers showing up, put a more experienced volunteer trail boss with those groups who haven't done this before, and you'll have a better outcome than if you kind of just send people off into the woods. Don't overcommit, plan for high turnout. Again, this all comes into your interactions and relationships with the land manager and knowing what the project is. Finally, and this is probably the one lesson that I learned in all of this, the biggest takeaway for me is get it in writing. Institutional knowledge can be lost. And so what do I mean by that? If you've been working with a state park, for example, and you have multiple superintendents or administrations kind of turned over the years, there is a loss of institutional knowledge. There's a loss of relationships. So to the extent you do have an ongoing working relationship with a land manager, memorialize it in some way. Get a MOU, a memorandum of understanding, a letter of support, and document all of it. Get it all in writing. If you want to set up that work day, get it in an email. If you want approval for putting up some signs, get it in an email. Just protect yourself and protect the land user, protect the landowners, and make sure everybody's on the same page, because there is always that risk of losing your contacts and then having to start over. Finally, waivers are often used as a way of trying to protect the landowner, protect the organization. I'm a lawyer. I personally wouldn't want to support the entire defense of a personal injury suit on a waiver, but it's better than nothing. Get them anyways. And if the landowner has requirements on waivers, follow them. In the end, again, we're working to benefit the users by satisfying the land manager and addressing their priorities. So, in the end, we're all in a small way, trying to add value to the land that we work with and improve this outdoor experience. And, to the extent when we get to the Q&A portion of this, I have something to add. I'm more than happy to do that. So I think I'm about wrapped up here. And Ken, if we want to pass it along to Mr. Yeager, by all means.
Thank you, Brad. Really appreciate that insight. Thank you for all your work that you're doing with your organization. I do want to point out that, as Brad mentioned, we're going to, after the three presentations, we are going to have a question and answer session that will allow people to send their questions in through the chat. And we'll also have a conversation with myself and the three panelists, just talking about maintenance and maintenance strategies. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. Thanks again, Brad, but we're going to turn it over to Matt Yeager. Matt is with the West Virginia Department of Natural Resources, Parks and Recreation, where he's a district administrator, and I think he has been for about 6 years. Is that right, Matt?
That's
And
correct. Yeah.
he's a graduate of Marshall University, has a bachelor's degree in parks and conservation, and he just loves the outdoors. He loves hunting, fishing, gardening, and trail life, and he's going to give us some perspective of what trail maintenance issues look like from DNR's point of view. So, Matt, it's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. Appreciate the opportunity to be here. This is a great forum here. Appreciate everyone that was involved in putting this together. I'm going to just look at the aspects from the West Virginia State Parks and Forest perspective. With that being said, our park system has over 350 trails covering over 1,200 miles, and we continue to grow. State parks include rail trails, which would be the Elk River, Greenbrier, North Bend Rail Trails we're all familiar with. Of course, the Elk River being new to us, and we're working to expand that and improve that along the way. We have the hiking and multi-use trails. Those are your typical trails. It'll be a half-mile trail to 6-mile trail on a local state park. But most of those are hiking, and there's some of those that are also multi-use with shared hiking and biking. Then we have, again, this might be redundant, but user-specific trails. Of course, there's some trails that are geared only to hiking. We have the kayak trail, with something new for us at Beach Fork State Park. We have several parks with equestrian use trails. Of course, we have designated mountain bike courses, and also there's a pilot ATV trail at the Cabway-Lingo State Forest. Additionally, we have gated service roads. You'll typically find those leading to gas well sites or forestry related work, and those are typically in our state forest. So that's a little bit about the state parks. So how do we keep all these trails maintained and moving forward and expanding even? And it's volunteers. We know that. We know that we're very dependent upon the volunteers, and Brad did a very good presentation there in talking about how it's so important getting these 501c3 groups together. Our state park foundations, those are important parts to our trail system. Local civic groups, individuals that are just interested in taking care of the trails. For example, a big storm comes by, and a fellow that uses the trail every day, he's out there, rain or snow, and he says, "Man, I can't get through this major storm came." So he says, "Can I get out there and take my chainsaw and help you clear this out?" Well, yes, you can, but we have a form to do that, and there are some forms that you'll see in the WHOVA site. And we have a volunteer form in which we would take this individual and say, "Hey, can you just, let's figure out what you're going to do, where you're going to be, and sign this form." It just kind of defines the terms and the liability concerns related to the DNR. Helps us to be, focused in what type of work's going to be done, and what tools and so forth. But we do allow volunteers to use DNR owned tools in certain instances, but depends on if it's machinery or whatnot, and even supplies. If there's a volunteer group just going out to pick up the litter and the trash, we'll provide bags and that type of thing. So we're very appreciative of our volunteers. They do work with the park superintendent level, and the park superintendent works with the district administrator, which would be my position, and the central office here. And what we do is, on basic jobs, just routine trail maintenance of cleaning or fixing a problem area, the superintendent will develop the scope of work. But then, moving on to bigger projects and so forth, we'll get more of the central office engaged and to figure out how we're going to develop that trail. Okay, moving on to the trail coordinators. This is a really neat position that we have here in the state parks. We only have 5 of them right now. And I'll be honest, I'm just learning about these positions. I have I've been over, a district, certain district that didn't have these. So I've learned that we do have these, 3 of these 5 positions filled. And one of them is at North Bend State Park, the other at Kanawha State Forest. And we're working to fill one at Twin Falls State Park. We're looking to fill 2 other trail coordinator positions at Blackwater Falls and Canaan Valley Resort. Again, on that Wahova site, there is a job description that'll tell you the details of what you would be as a trail coordinator. But basically, the trail coordinators are responsible for inventory, assessment, and analysis of trail conditions, needs, and uses. They coordinate trail rehabilitation, restoration, and potential rerouting for all hiking, biking, equestrian, and multiple use trails. They work to secure grants, corporate sponsorships, volunteers, and donations. That's it in a nutshell. A lot to do. As you can see, it takes someone that, really dedicated and devoted to work all this out and make this, it definitely deserves to be a position in our parks. And like I said, we have 2 openings and 5 positions overall. Okay, moving on to trail design. Trail design is our goal is to always have a self-sustaining trail system for the hiking and biking in development. But we know that that's a lofty goal. But if we are working to develop a trail, we often are guided by the type of trail users. So we have to determine what our user group is going to be. And usually that's told to us. There's a user group that will come in and often influence the type of trail that we're going to develop. Now, these user groups, for instance, might be a bike trail or an equestrian trail group. So, to help us as managers, as land managers, to kind of have an idea, okay, we don't, as park superintendents and land managers, we're not always out on the trails looking at designs. We've got a lot of administrative and other work to do. So the National Forest Service design parameters are used to help us to determine the best trail designs. That doesn't mean that we just sit there and says, we dot every I and cross every T on this, but it helps us to develop a scope of work and how we design trails. Something new that we're working on at North Bend is it's new to me is the equestrian trails system at North Bend. We're actually putting in a camping area that will accommodate equestrian use and developing and expanding the equestrian trail system there. This is something new, but we have a equestrian group that is very instrumental, going to be doing a lot of the work to helping making these trails come to be. So we're working and excited that we can finally have an opportunity to say, okay, group, we've got a place for you where you're going to have many miles of trails, and we've got camping facilities. And that's something that we've lacked in the park system. And we do get a lot of calls regarding that use. And so it's given us an outlet for this user group. And so we're excited about that. One thing on the trail design, we have it's another downloadable thing on the Wahova site of the National Forest design parameters that you can find there as well. Trail funding, West Virginia State Parks has a matching grant program. It's limited to West Virginia State Park foundations. And our foundations are very crucial to our operations, and they fill in the gaps so many times, and we appreciate them. But they'll have a variety of projects. It could be fixing a certain facility or fixing a trail. So when those projects come in, we're able to review those projects and the design of it and so forth. And then if it meets the criteria of the central office, then we can match whatever they have accumulated in their funding and help that project along. And other projects, other sources of funding that you're probably familiar with is the Recreation Trails Grant and the Transportation Enhancement Grant. An example of the Transportation Enhancement Grant is the work that we're doing to improve the old Sewell Road It goes down from the Babcock grist mill down to the New River. This old road is just been demolished over the years through storms and mudslides and so forth. And it's a very significant project. So, we're utilizing that enhancement grant in stages there to try to upgrade that road. Of course, recreation trail grants, we've utilized them throughout the park system just to either rehab, reroute, build new hiking and biking trails. So with that said, that's wrapping up what I have to say. I'll be happy to answer any questions later on.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was really helpful. As someone who's worked a lot with North Bend State Park and North Bend Rail Trail, the work that you and your guys do is just remarkable, and you do it really on an incredibly tight budget. You accomplish an awful lot of work with very little money, and it's a real tribute to your staff, but it's also a tribute to those who care about your state parks and want to volunteer some time. So thank you again, Matt. We're going to move on to our next speaker. I want to remind everybody that we're going to have a conversation after Ella Belling has made her presentation, and we would welcome your questions or comments so that we can forward those to the panelists during that conversation. Ella Belling is the executive director of the Mon River Trails Conservancy. This is a 48-mile rail trail system based in Morgantown. She's also the president of the West Virginia Rails to Trails Council. Her work focuses on building, maintaining, and promoting rail trails in her home state, and of course, obviously in Mon County. She earned her BA in English at Bethany College and an MS in Recreation, Parks, and Tourism Resources from WVU University. And in her spare time, Ella enjoys camping, birding, hiking, and kayaking. I do want to mention that Ella is sort of the person who really keeps the Mon River Trail system operating. She's been with it for an awful long time and has built that system up to the point where the Mon River Trail system was recently recognized as one of the Rails to Trails Conservancy's Hall of Fame trail systems. So it's received a lot of national recognition as well as recognition here in West Virginia as a really superior trail system. And that's not to say that being as good as it doesn't bring its share of challenges. So Ella, I'm going to turn it over to you. You can talk a little bit about those challenges and some of the ways that you address them. Thank you.
Thank you, Kent. That's a nice warm welcome, and good morning, everyone. It's great to have everybody on this session, and it is nice to be invited to that non-glamorous topic of trail maintenance. It's very non-glamorous, but it's nice to have it, as Nathan said, on the vision day for the trail conference, because it's been in my vision for many decades, I think now. So I am in Morgantown, West Virginia at my office, which is the behind the scene workings of the Mon River Rail Trails and the Mon River Trails Conservancy. And the Mon River Trails Conservancy is a 3-county, 48-mile rail trail organization. We're a nonprofit, and we formed in 1991 and have been raising money, building and planning rail trail for 3 decades, and worked for many, many years to get 48 miles of trail built, and thought, oh, okay, here's the honeymoon. But we realized right off that we now needed to move right into the maintenance world and making sure that trail stays safe and welcoming and usable. So you can see by this slide, kind of gives you an overview, but I want you to kind of orient yourself. Our biggest town is in Morgantown, and the nearby small town of Star City both have a paved trail, which you can see the dog walkers in the slide are on a paved trail surface. And then we also have 40 miles of compacted stone, which you can see to the right with the cyclist That's a compacted stone surface. And we have all types of users, all types of motivations for getting out and using the trails, like many of you probably have. And we have it open for use all year, and it gets heavy use all year. So you can see on the top there, that's our elevated Preston County. Our trail system goes through Monongalia, Marion, and Preston counties. And in Preston County, you can have an elevation that supports a lot of cross-country skiing some years. So we also have many access areas and connections to the Upper Mon Water Trail. So though I'm not the mover and shaker of the water trail, I certainly do help support that work as well, and we partner with them a lot. I like that word alliance that Brad was using. I think I'm going to start using that more instead of partner in describing some of the work we do. Okay, next slide. The next slide that you're going to see is going to be talking about the routine trail maintenance, and we have typically the big things that have to happen are mowing and brush cutting and maintaining our drainage so that our trail stays protected and doesn't wash out or flood out. So ditches and culverts are really important, as well as clearing down trees. And I kind of want to point to that picture where you can see the down trees across the trail. That can happen in my world every day of the week. It can happen probably at least 2 or 3 times a week that we have that situation happen, and we have to get out and respond quickly. And I think what's valuable about that photo is that the photographer is a trail user. We depend as much on anything as our trail users to be trail monitors. So they all have either my information loaded up in their phones or the city parks information loaded up, and can shoot a picture, send us, a little description of where it's located, and so that our maintenance, either volunteers or crew, can get out and clear those trees. Because that's, nothing worse than wanting to get out and do an adventure and have that obstacle take place. So there's sometimes a lot of acrobatic work when we're talking about forested trails of trying to get around trees. But anyway, I also want to talk about the fact that we depend on volunteers, but we also have paid maintenance crew, and we have a lot of work that gets done with contractors. So it's not one choice. We go to multiple options there for maintenance, and the alliance or partnership that we have with our city parks, which is Morgantown Boat Park is what their name is. They allow us to work and contract with them a maintenance crew of 2 people. One is the full-time crew person, and then a seasonal crew person. And they are on the rail trail all year long. They work with that big tractor mower that you see in the top. We also have an excavator and other types of equipment that we use to maintain trail. And that partnership also allows for storage space for keeping this equipment and insurance, and they have proper training on equipment that happens through that alliance. So it works in a lot of levels to have a partnership that others might see happening if you're starting to think about what other groups in your area could be a partner. to form an agreement and have a funding source that allows for maintenance crew, but allows for places where either public works or municipalities, Parks Department has places for you to store equipment or have trainings or, other things that might be of value. And then at the bottom, you see our volunteers out building a shelter. Okay, you can skip to the next slide. Thanks. The next kind of avenue, because we're talking about funding and that critical piece is we have a list here of all the options for trail maintenance. It would make you think that there was a lot, but there's not. And the one thing I want to kind of point out about this list that we use every single one of those things to help fund our maintenance. But the one that I want to focus on is the Parks and Trails County Levy, and that was in Monongalia County. And that is our one source of money that's a sustained, committed fund that we just renewed that in 2020 with the election. And 60% of the county had to approve of this levy in order for it to pass. And you can see kind of over in the image, the icon for it, a long list of different recreational stakeholders, recreational areas in our communities that that all received funding because this levy passed. And so what we did to make that happen was to kind of convene a group of recreational groups that would touch everybody in our community. And we're all in need of projects or maintenance or other things that we're needing a constant, stable funding source. And so in doing that, we were able to make sure that every voter probably had a connection or link, whether it was their kids or themselves out hiking in the Botanic Garden or enjoying the soccer fields or baseball games or different recreation, the ice arena. So we would kind of strategize on, first of all, how would this work and who all would need to be, how would we target our residents on voting yes? And it's become such a critical source for our funding, as some of these other things have had, bigger challenges. So in passing the levy, I certainly can give you a lot of details on that. And if anybody wants to talk to me about that strategy, I'm happy to do that. It does involve working with your county commissioners on getting it on the ballot. And a lot of counties will kind of lump it as a quality of life levy or some other type of name, but we chose to be direct and call it the Parks and Trails Levy. And for some kind of concept of this, it costs our average homeowner about 97 cents a month. So a small amount, it's less than $12 a year to support a lot of assets in our communities that we hope that in doing that, they're going to renew it every year because they feel the difference. But anyway, those are a lot of ways for us to help maintain and I think, and most importantly, maintenance is what is the thing that supports all of the community development, all of the healthy lifestyles, all of those things that we'll be talking about in this conference. All of those things happen because we're able to keep our trails safe and welcoming and easily accessed and fun places to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. We're going to pull Matt and Brad back up into the conversation, so you guys can turn your video and audio on, and we'll begin a discussion. And we have a few questions already showing up, and I'll get them out in front of you. And I have some questions as well. But don't think of this as just question and answer. It's a conversation. We have time for a good conversation. One question that has shown up is, while there has been a major upswing in outdoor recreation recently, and we're seeing many more users on our trail system, how is the best way to get the community more involved in the upkeep and maintenance of the trails? So this is really about, how do we recruit volunteers? How do you get your volunteers to engage with you, and how do you hold on to them?
Well, I can weigh in. That's a great question, and there's probably a lot of good answers to it that I'm not going to give you. But obviously word of mouth helps. But I think zooming out, it's like, what is the end goal? I mean, there's getting a lot of people involved, and then there's getting really truly invested folks involved. And obviously you can just sort of sift those people out of your volunteer pool. So I would say in all the same ways you kind of let people know about anything. I mean, social media has been a big boon for us. Getting your volunteer work day out there on Facebook with a Facebook event is as lame as that might sound, has actually helped us out quite a bit. I can tell you a lot of stories about how a new face will show up at a volunteer work day. I'm like, hey, I haven't seen you here before. How'd you hear about us? I found it on a Facebook event. I was like, oh, cool. All right. So, hop on board. Awesome. And then, 20 minutes later, we'll have a news reporter show up because they heard about it on Facebook or some online media posts. So don't be afraid to get out there, get it on the social media. Obviously, signage, that kind of thing. We have, flyers that we leave with the bike shops and the running stores and the places where your usual user suspects frequent. That's a good way to get them involved. And then, keeping them engaged is really the hard part. Getting the people out there seems to be pretty easy, but getting them consistently coming back and consistently engaged is the difficult part of it from my perspective. And so we have used a variety of ways of doing that. We use a online platform called Wild Apricot to manage our membership as well as our volunteer base. It's a super useful nonprofit platform that we learned about when we were forming our organization by reaching out to our friends at the Shenandoah Valley Bicycle Coalition, and Kyle Lawrence over there. And he, talked about how they were using a variety of different ways to reach members and reach volunteers, and they settled on that. So it was a good fit for us too. But yeah, don't be afraid to just even, just approach somebody on the trail and say, hey, we're going to be out here working next Saturday. If I see you're using this trail, if you're interested, come on out and, bring your kids, bring your dog, bring your friends, and we'll make this a better experience for everyone.
Great. Thanks, Brad. How about Ella or Matt? Talk to us a little bit about how you get these suckers to work for you.
I'll go ahead there. It's a great question. The uptick in user in the outdoor recreation field has definitely been a factor. It seems like we're just hanging on with low workforce and high use, trying to keep up with the demands. But definitely there is an opportunity there to reach out and let folks know, about our state park foundations, and when they come to the office, we work with them. I can relate when I was superintendent at different areas. Folks would come in and talk about the trails, the condition of the trails, and how can I help? Again, we try to accommodate those requests as best we can, and utilize that free labor at any time. We would never turn it down. But, as you're talking about the increase in demand, just getting brochures of our 501c3s and just having the opportunity to communicate where these resources are that they can team up with and be part of the work groups that are going on.
Great. Ella, you have a long success record of success with volunteers. What tips would you give to somebody trying to start a volunteer program for their trail?
Yeah, well, I agree with everything that has been said. I think we have found that there are, different projects that need different types of people and different kinds of volunteer effort. So I think what Brad was saying earlier about, having a core group of people who can operate a chainsaw, and that's a different group than a group that might be interested in doing fence painting or repairs to a shelter, something like that. So it's also kind of trying to match, what your needs are with the right people. But, a lot of times it's, they see a volunteer crew out working, and that's how we get a trail user to stop and say, hey, maybe I want to be involved in that too. And how do I connect with this? Or they run across a down tree, like Matt says, if you're out there and you understand the conditions, you feel like you need to connect, and we hope that we can provide that option. But we also get, I think you want to look at your community and see where the partners are in your community. We get a lot of Eagle Scout projects, so we connect with the Scouts a lot. We also connect with the Rotary in our area. So they have done a lot on putting in benches and other amenities. And I think if you find the active groups that are seeking out service projects, that's a big help.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I see one of our attendees put in the chat that he volunteers for the free firewood that he gets. So, you got to find what buttons to push for different people, right? Question for all of you is, do you track your volunteer hours? And do you use that tracking as in-kind match for grants?
If you don't mind, I'll weigh in. Yes and yes. We track all of our hours, even if it's administrative hours, for working on projects, putting together an RFQ or an RFP, any of that stuff. We keep track of it. And I think a good example of a partnership where this is important is, I think you mentioned, I'm a member of the Kanawha State Forest Foundation also. And so there's a bit of overlap when it comes to, the interests of the foundation and the interests of the Kanawha Valley Trail Alliance. And we've worked really closely with both the foundation and the state forest to develop a system for tracking volunteer hours. Now, we as an organization don't utilize their system, but we participate in it. So to the extent that we are out there doing work at Kanawha State Forest, Jody Richmond, who's the trail coordinator out there, doing a wonderful job, Matt, put together an online form, 2 online forms, one for volunteer signups and one for hourly reporting. And so whenever we have a trail work day out at Kanawha State Forest, we track those hours internally, obviously, but then we report them to the state forest and the foundation, and then they use those often in support of grants or in-kind labor for securing grants. So yeah, super important. It's hard to get some people to do it sometimes. I know I have a few, like I think I mentioned the super volunteers before. We have a couple guys that are just nonstop, and getting them to slow down and check the boxes and report hours can be a real challenge. But just try. That's all you can do is just get them to do it. And then, at the end of the year, when you see you have, this one person has 300 hours, and it's like, wow, you wouldn't have ever tracked any of that, would you? Nope. So it is a constant struggle, and just try to find a way to make it part of the process is all I can say.
Ella or Matt, do you have anything to add to that? Thank you for that, Brad.
I'll just say we track volunteer hours in the state parks. It includes a variety of projects. So we have volunteers that, do different projects besides trail work. So it is all inclusive into our volunteer bank. But I like what Brad said, the super volunteer, you couldn't pay those guys or girls any salary or wage to do what they do. They're just super valuable, but they're focused on working and not oftentimes tracking their time and so forth. And I agree with that. But again, we do keep a bank of volunteer hours and utilizing it towards grants. We have that bank to pull from when we need it, I can't give you an example of where I've actually used that, but it's there if we do need it.
Ella?
I agree.
Okay. All right, before we move on to another subject other than volunteers, I do want to ask what you do in terms of volunteer recognition. Is there a way that you can show your appreciation to your volunteers, and what does that look like in your example?
I can weigh in on that. We certainly do. We have a Volunteer of the Year award that we give out at our annual meetings with the West Virginia State Park Superintendents. It boils down to just recognizing the variety of volunteers that are out there for what they do. We bring recognition to all of them. But, it's the hardest thing to do is just to choose one for the year. But we definitely show our recognition in that regard. And I'm sure we could do more, but we do have that system set up.
Great. Others?
Yeah, I don't know that we have a specific sort of, award or trophy we hand anybody at the end of the year. But what I think we do well is, really respect folks' time. And part of that is keeping track of it. But part of it is not abusing it, right? So making sure that folks aren't out there feeling like they're sort of, alone in this process, that they have support, and that they aren't going to, just kind of walk away from this with no one really acknowledging the effort that they've put in, because that's a bad feeling. So just keeping your volunteers just super engaged, keeping it kind of fun, not turning a volunteer workday into a death march is always a good thing. Preparing people ahead of time for what they're going to be getting into is a way of kind of respecting their ability and the time they're spending. I'm not going to say that having an end of the year banquet or something like that isn't a great idea. In fact, I think it is, and I'd love to do it, but for COVID. But for us, we're still looking at ways to sort of find, partnerships with local shops, maybe a discount at, the running store. I know I've directed people to a few, there's a few, I guess, outdoor industry type discount outlets out there online, where if you can show your affiliation with, an outdoor industry type of group, you can get some really nice pricing on all the things outdoor people like to buy. And so Outdoor Pro Link is a good, as one of those. Expert Voice is another one. I'm always directing people to go to those. It's like, oh, hey, I can get my Cliff Bars half off now. Wonderful. So, kind of parlaying this good work you're doing into something that can benefit yourself is something we'll try to point people towards if they've shown interest in that.
Ella, you, I know, do some recognition. I know COVID is a challenge for all of us in terms of those events. You want to talk a little bit about some of the things you do with your volunteers?
Well, I think you've hit on a thing that I don't see enough or do enough of. I think I agree that we try to make the day itself valuable and meaningful, and have, you know, that work feel like it's a worthwhile endeavor, and not pull people out if that's not the case, you know. But I think, yeah, it's been a challenge with COVID and not having gatherings to kind of celebrate the year or celebrate an accomplishment. So I think that, you know, returning to that, we hope to kind of do better at making sure people feel that their time and their skills are worthy of celebrating. Yeah, I think that it's unfortunately an easy thing. It's almost like maintenance, where you feel like you need to get something accomplished, and that becomes the focus and not the people themselves doing it. And so you hope that they feel like it's meaningful too in itself, but you always feel like you need to recognize them a little more than you do.
Yeah, and then there's that balance that you have to maintain between overworking your volunteers and underworking your volunteers. Nothing worse than volunteering for something and not having anything to do. So it's a fine balance for your trail managers to try to find that balance. And I did want to mention concerning this volunteer in-kind match value, that last I looked in West Virginia, an hour of in-kind volunteer work is worth a little over $20. So, you know, it mounts up pretty fast if you can track those hours. I want to move on to a question. I've got several questions about this. I'm going to tie some of them together. And that is, while there is some funding available for trail acquisition and construction through TA and Rec Trails grants and the like, it's really hard to find money for maintenance in West Virginia. Can you speak a little bit about that challenge and where these funds could be sourced? And I'm going to add a little twist to this question, another layer, and that is, this is a visioning session, and I want you to vision what is the ideal world for you and your trails in terms of what state support might look like in terms of trail maintenance. Imagine what we might do as a state to enhance our ability to properly maintain our trails. So funding sources and the wild ass big idea about how we could really develop a sustainable system for maintenance. Big picture stuff. Anybody want to start?
I've got some ideas that have floated by me, and that some of the foundations are contemplating, and that is getting Q codes out on the trails where people can, you know, that use the trails can, you know, identify with that and donate directly to the foundation. The state monies that are out there, as far as, you know, from the parks, that seems to be it's there regularly. We do devote a certain amount of funding and time to our trails. Coordination is what's important there, is to, you know, how and the best uses that we utilize it. But the other ideas for funding is, and I know the foundation folks will agree with this, is, you know, they do fundraisers, annual fundraisers, different events, different parks and trails, rail trails, that really they are a backbone of a lot of the upkeep and funding of our trails.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, I as far as funding goes, I have some questions for Ella about that. But as far as statewide goes, I love that the state is has developed this trail coordinator position for the parks. I see a ton of potential there. I've seen a lot of progress already with how that's going. I don't know if this is floated out there, or if maybe this is happening, but I'd love to see a statewide trail coordinator. Somebody who's bringing maybe a little bit of uniformity with regard to how projects play out, what signage looks like, all that kind of thing. Not to detract from maybe the individual and unique nature of each park, but maybe more to kind of streamline the process through the park, so that if when North Bend works functionally from a trail maintenance perspective as Kanawha State Forest, as Cacapon, because in my experience, and maybe I'm wrong, everybody kind of has their own little thing. Everything operates a little bit differently, and we can always navigate that. But I think that would be something worth looking into. Funding wise, we don't bring in a lot of money for maintenance. A lot of what we try to do is point those grant dollars to other organizations. So to the extent we can, for example, help the foundation fund a project, my organization is not going to be the one that's out there soliciting the dollars.
Right.
We'll be going there and pointing those people to the foundation for that project, and then coming in to help get it done. Right. So that's kind of where we fit on that end of things. But I'm very intrigued by the levy, the Parks and Trails levy, and we'd love to hear more about the process, Ella, for getting that done, and maybe the biggest 1 or 2 or 3 obstacles to getting it in place.
Yeah, so one of the things that we're hoping comes out of this trail conference is ideas for future sessions and conferences. And certainly that whole levy question could be a session unto itself as to how you can organize and motivate your community to support that levy being directed towards trails. I do want to point out that most of the states around West Virginia have some source of state funding dedicated to trails. West Virginia does not. And I saw one of the attendees mention that Maryland does have a lead trail person at the state level. And I totally agree, Brad, that we need some sort of state trail coordinator. With the trail plan from 20 years ago, they called for a state coordinator for trails in West Virginia. And that position sort of found itself in highways and became largely the administrator of the transportation enhancement grants and the recreational trails grants. And other than grant management, there was little capacity for that person to do other things. There's just too much on the staff plate at highways. So I think finding a way to create a statewide trail coordinator position that is sustainable and is dedicated full-time to that trail coordination in West Virginia would be a great goal of a statewide trail plan update. So thank you for that.
I don't think, just to jump in before you move to the next question,
Yeah.
I also think, I agree, we need to see more support in state funding, not just in, and I also believe that more funding should be going to the state parks, but I think you can look around at our neighboring states. Pennsylvania is one of them, which has I think it's called Growing Greener grants that use a tax on natural gas to help fund trail development and park enhancements and all kinds of projects. And so I think it doesn't take, it takes a lot of political will, community will to make those things happen. But I think that you can see examples of it across the country on how other places are helping to supplement and add to the federal dollar or local dollar. And so maybe it's a match, or maybe it's something that shows a commitment at a local level, but I definitely think that we need to start trying to encourage that of our state representatives to look into those avenues of funding. I also think that it's become unfortunately harder through the rec trail program. It does have money for maintenance equipment and for some upgrades, and that's a federal funding source for projects, but it's become harder to access that money, unfortunately. And I think that there's a lot of ways we can work to try to improve that as well.
Yeah, I think anybody who has worked with highways for the transportation alternatives funding or the rec trails funding is deeply appreciative of that funding and the work that they do. But we also know that there's some real challenges in terms of their capacity to get those dollars out the door and get those projects moving. And some projects tend to languish for an awful long time. So certainly one of the things we would want to do as a part of the statewide trail plan that we hope we will eventually get is to take a look at how we as citizens and communities and trail groups can help highways more effectively implement those trail grants. I think that would be a great outcome. I have a couple of specific questions. And what I'm going to do, one question is about what's the name of the equestrian trail group that you work with, Matt? You don't have to answer that in this conference, but and another is, do you have some sources for risk management and safety plans for volunteers? Rather than get into that, I would encourage the attendees at this conference to reach out by email to the panelists if you have a very specific question such as that. And I'm sure they'll be glad to help you with that. We're running out of time, and I want to ask a quick question about the user fee issue and how, does anybody have user fees and what do those look like? How do you charge a user fee for a trail?
Can I chime in on this one? So I've lived in a few places. I know a lot of people live lots of places, but I've also, I used to race bikes a lot. And when I did that, I traveled a lot. So I got to see a lot of different trail systems across the country by virtue of the wheels that were under me. And that is the one thing I haven't seen in West Virginia. There seems to be an allergy to collecting money for the use of public land here, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. It's just different, and it does create an obstacle when it comes to raising funds. You look at kind of the quality of, I'm just going to pick Douthit right across the border here in Virginia. You know, they collect a user fee to access their trails, and that park is just immaculate. I mean, they're clearly, it's a self-feeding cycle, right? If you bring money in, you can use it to improve the trails, which brings more people in, which brings more money in, which improves the quality of the trails and all the other infrastructure and amenities. And it starts to sustain itself better. The same was pretty true in Wisconsin. I don't think I ever went to a state park in my entire life where we didn't have to either buy a year-long stamp to put on our windshield or pay $5 to go use those trails or have your truck towed. So, you know, I'm fully in favor of that. I'd love to see it maybe explored here. Maybe if a couple of the parks just wanted to try it out to see how it went, maybe the backlash wouldn't be so bad as you know, feared. But that's my 2 cents.
Great. Others?
I don't know what to think about the trail user fee. I think one of in my world, I think the challenge would be that a lot of our grants from foundations or from, well, all kinds of different level of grants are based on having a free access and free accessible to all kinds of people, to the public recreation space, and or, you know, transportation or health, whatever you want to call our trail systems. But so I think that it could bring in money, but it also could have a reverse effect of being able to block you from that. The other, I guess I have a question about the level liability and that of those things. And so there's an expectation if you're paying a fee that, you know, you're going to get a certain experience. And I don't know how that would play out. Brad might know better than I do on that realm. But you know, I think there's a level of, you know, we're providing a wonderful, hopefully great experience and a recreational area for people. But I would like to, especially in West Virginia, where we're trying to significantly increase people's healthy lifestyles and healthy activities, I would want it to be just usable for all. And so that's my cautionary, I guess, on that idea. But I also see the same goes. I've been to those places and certainly didn't mind contributing.
Great. We're about out of time. I want to thank the three panelists for all of their work, first of all, for their being willing to share some of their thoughts with everybody today, and for all the time they put into preparing and delivering their presentations. I particularly like the idea, Matt, of the Q codes on the trails. You know, I mean, when you're out there having a great experience on the trail and you get an opportunity to make a donation right then, you're much more likely to do it than if you have to wait until you get home, try to find the website. Where do I donate? It's just such a great idea. I think trails should be doing this all over West Virginia. And it's a way to bring in some resources without actually having to charge those user fees. So
That's right.
something to think about for local trail groups. With that, I want to encourage everybody to sign up and join one of the sessions about the user groups later on today. And I think that would be a good conversation. This is an open conversation. The attendees will be able to use their cameras and their audio to join a conversation instead of having to send questions in through the chat or the Q&A. So it'll be a more open conversation, and I hope that all of our panelists will attend one of those sessions as well. And that is at noon, so in 20 minutes. And you'll be able to sign in through the Whova site. The panelists' emails are also available on the Whova site. Thank you again, everybody. And I hope to see folks in one of those user groups at noon today, and that everyone will rejoin us tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.